Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, is there a bigger flex than emotional intelligence? I spent a lifetime pursuing external performance, what we achieve athletically and entrepreneurially, even altruistically and spiritually. And I upheld the skill and ability of social awareness and reading and influencing people. I put a high value on controlling oneself. What I missed was knowing myself and understanding my own emotions, much less anyone else's. If I could go back, I would trade in so much, maybe everything, for emotional intelligence. I find no greater understanding, wisdom, and power than that which comes from having high emotional intelligence, which I don't have. I feel I'm still in early training, and I'm ecstatic that I found my guest for this episode, Dr. Patrick Kilcarr. Patrick has been the director of Georgetown University's Center for Personal Development since 1999. He's a master trainer in emotional intelligence, certifying professionals to use the EQ-I 2.0, which is the most valid and reliable self-assessment of emotional intelligence. He certifies them to assess and evaluate the social and emotional competencies of individuals in a variety of professional venues. All of Patrick's work is directed towards strengthening the individual with respect to his or her innate talents and abilities. He's written extensively on emotional intelligence, addiction, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I found Patrick through a book he published back in 2022 called Leading an Emotionally Intelligent Life, Expanding Your Emotional Intelligence to Make Courageous Decisions and Transform Your Life. Dr. Kilcarr maintains a private practice in Washington, D.C., where he offers individual, couples, group, and family therapy. And you can find more information at his website, which is the EI, as in emotional intelligence, life.com, theeilife.com. Friends, when I'm not having these discussions on human potential, I'm working directly with people on their human potential. I have a lot of people contacting me as they look towards a new year, looking at their purpose and next steps. Be happy to talk with you. Find me at kevinmiller.co. Here are a few sponsors. They make the show possible. Then drive with me a moment to consider emotional intelligence and hear what Patrick Kilcarr has to offer us. I find it dramatically profound. It is to my life. It's changing my life. Let's see what we can all learn for ourselves today. Patrick, as you even say in the start of your book, the concept of emotional intelligence, I mean, we've been talking about that for a while. That's not a unique term.
Right.
And it's one of those, though, that I feel like we don't get it.
Right.
It's a term we know, but I don't know that I see anybody actually conceiving of where they're at, making progress and saying, oh my gosh, am I so much more emotionally intelligent? And as a result, my well-being has gone up than I was, 2 years ago. And so when your book came across my desk, not only was I interested, but then when I started reading it, honestly, Patrick, it was really the compassionate angle that you came at in regards to yourself, your own experience with it, and really a lot of your students in your work as a professor at Georgetown that I knew right away I wanted to talk. So thank you. I'm honored and eager to dig in and learn more with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know what? If you talk to people and you ask them, can you describe an emotionally intelligent person? They're not sure. However, they know somebody who's emotionally intelligent when they meet them. And it's because of that vibe. And a lot of it's more the intuitive vibe of the way this person kind of interacts, the way they pace, what they say. And I think it's really true. I mean, I have my own ideas about what emotional intelligence is. However, it's pretty unmistakable when you're in the presence of it. And I'll give you an example. 3 days ago, I was stepping off an elevator, and there was a little girl that she had a cup of milk. I think she dropped it. She was maybe 4. And you could see the mother was in a hurry. She was carrying like all this stuff. And I was just coming off the elevator. She looks at her daughter. She smiles, puts everything down, then kneels down and says, "That really is terrible." And she said yes and just held her. And I helped for a couple seconds, kind of clean up, and then I walked on. That was an emotionally intelligent moment. And this woman's in a rush. Hurry the heck up. Think about all of us out there that have kids. We're trying to get out the door, get them to school, whatever. And we're losing our marbles at times. And I think the emotional intelligent person is someone that is acutely aware of what's going on in their environment, yet they take the time to be with, minister to the people around them, if that makes any kind of sense.
It does. So let me back up then, not back up, but then turn to that woman and
Right.
say, what are the qualities that you would probably recognize in her to be able to act and behave in that way? That was one of the questions I was going to ask. What are the tip-offs to an emotionally intelligent person? Because I'll not mirror it. I'll say I think I have confused it with socially aware, for one, and probably stoic to some degree as well.
Those are two great ones. And stoicism as a person, I really find very grounding. And I literally, Mark Aurelius, I think about these thinkers and these people that truly lived out what they believed in a lot of ways. And the social piece, both of those are there at that moment. What I see was someone where I really go, wow, this person's got some serious emotional intelligence. What comes through immediately is empathy. And that mother at that moment, I'm telling you, she was carrying so much stuff, and you could see they were in a hurry. And I think that's why the little one dropped her cup. And the mother, I just put herself in that place with this little one and kneeled down eye to eye with her and held her. And I mean, there are many things I think going on at that moment, but to your question, which is just a brilliant one, it's empathy. It's being able to go, you know what? I may even be mad. And even though I'm mad, I'm able at that moment to be with that person, whoever it may be. And it's particularly true when we're with kids, when we're with our kids. But that's the one thing that comes through for me would be empathy.
Okay, let me ask on that, Patrick, to be empathetic with someone else, do I need to first be able to be empathetic with myself?
Brilliant question. Ideally, yes. And that piece about being empathic with just me. Well, what does that mean? So let's start there, and then we'll go to the empathy of others. And with me, it would be not having this voice in our head, which is negative, it's biting, it's caustic, and that it's this notion of which wolf do we feed? And I think, I don't know if you've heard this before, you probably have, and maybe everyone in the audience, but there's an old American Indian folklore story. And it's about this granddad that goes on this journey with his granddaughter and his grandson. And they're sitting by this beautiful river and water cascading over the rocks. And he's looking at it. And he looks at his granddaughter and grandson. And he says, I have to share with them what I'm going through. And so he gets their attention. And he said, I need to share with both of you something that's happening with me. And there is a war going on inside of me. And it's between two wolves. There's the angry, impetuous, snarling wolf, or there's the wolf of love and hope. And the granddaughter looks at the granddad and says, well, who wins? And the granddad looks and says, the wolf you feed. And the grandson and granddaughter kind of together go, well, what do you feed it? And he said, well, the angry wolf, you feed fear and dismay and doubt. And the wolf of hope, you feed what's possible. And I I bring that up because to me, showing ourselves empathy, being kind to ourselves, if you will, it's about getting rid of or making as anorexic as possible that wolf of fear
Yeah.
and anger. And I think it's a lifelong journey doing that, or at least it has been for me.
I want to look at the ways that we miss it, that we miss emotional intelligence. Just like me saying, social awareness or stoicism, or because I think I've done really well with both of those aspects and missed very much emotional intelligence. And in the same sense, being able to kind of on the stoic aspect, control myself, not lose
Yes.
myself to emotions, and be in control of the situation and whatnot, and steer the ship amongst a storm and that kind of thing. I've been able to do that. And on the other side, probably being critical of someone who is just overly emotional. And
Sure.
yet now I'm looking at both of those and going, yeah, but neither of those again are emotionally intelligent.
Right.
Am I correct? Okay.
Yeah, because look, I when I think of stoicism, Kevin, I think of two things specifically. One is taking responsibility for who I am and what I do in the world, good, bad, or indifferent. But I own it, and I think with that, to the whole notion of the EQI and the competencies that I talk about in the book, emotional self awareness is really important, because that leads into our self regard. How we feel about who we are in the world,
Yeah.
and it's but I can take responsibility and also be able to know when I'm wrong and that I need to correct whatever that behavior or thought or whatever it is. But that doesn't necessarily mean, to your point, that I'm emotionally intelligent. It just means that, look, I'm aware when I do something, and that um, but that doesn't necessarily give me an insight into how I feel or deal with others until later in that notion of stoicism, which you and I were talking about before, that it is about owning who we are, and then it's also being able to recognize the good within others and to capitalize on that good. And that gets a little bit closer to being emotionally intelligent. Uh, but it's you're right. There are things that we do, and because someone is a good person, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be emotionally intelligent. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's a genuinely good man, and he never yells at his kids. He's generally, whatever they need, he's there. But his kids, if you ask the kids about the father's emotions,
Mm-hmm.
how does he deal with anger? What's it like when he's really happy? How does he kind of talk to you about what he does in the world professionally, maybe in terms of something within the world of social responsibility? They have no idea, none, because he just keeps it all here. And you and I could literally talk for hours about why that is. However, is he an emotionally intelligent guy? No, not in the truest sense. Um, because I think he is an empathic human being, although you don't really see it. He's just there when you need him. However, you don't really know what he's feeling and what's going on. And growing up as a man in the world, starting as a young boy into adolescence, young adulthood, um, I did not initially have the best role models about what does it mean to be an emotionally intelligent person? What does it mean to be an emotionally intelligent man in the world? And, especially right now where our country is fraught with all kinds of different things and people are against one another and banging heads with one another. Um, that piece of emotional intelligence, which could go so far in creating not even reconciliation, but just connection, it's not there. And yeah.
Patrick, let me ask you on that. I don't think I did. What brought you to this focus on emotional intelligence? What was the catalyst that made you say, this is where I'm going to devote myself?
So 15 years ago, I was at a conference and I went into this, one of the breakout sessions it was on emotional intelligence. And I sat down, and at that point, beyond Dan Goleman's book, I really didn't know much about it. And this woman began to talk about emotional intelligence through the lens of these 15 competencies, which actually my book tracks those competencies.
Right.
And those 15 competencies, it starts with self-regard, ends with optimism. These are 15 competencies that everybody on this planet operates out of moment to moment, day to day. And she began to talk about how to use this. And at that time, the EQI was only used in the boardroom or the classroom, kind of higher ed organizations, corporations, to do team building and bring people together to understand each other better. And I really loved what I was seeing. And so I went up to her after and, we began talking. And this led to me having a conversation with Steve Stein, who's the president and owner of MHS, Multi Health Systems in Canada, Toronto, Canada. And after the conversations, Steve invited me to come up and train me as a master trainer in emotional intelligence. And they're coming through MHS, there were very few people that had just that tremendous opportunity. So I went, and then I began doing certification trainings in the EQI for institutions of higher ed, so colleges and universities. And what that means is, let's say that you're a professor and within your department, you're the chair of the department, let's say there's 15 other faculty members, full, part-time, whatever. I would come in and train you and train them to use the EQI with their students or with their groups or whatever. So I'd certify them to use the tool. And so then they would go about using it. I'd have interactions with them and we'd talk about it after the training. But it's never really been used individually and or clinically. Mm-hmm. And so I went and did a training for one of our professors here on campus about the EQI and about the competencies in emotional intelligence. And after it, one of the teaching assistants wasn't able to be there. And he came and said, hey, can you give me the EQI? And also, I'd like to talk to you a little bit kind of clinically or in therapy, if that's okay. So I said, okay. So he started coming in, he took the EQI, and what I noticed based on what he was saying and looking at the EQI and the way his particular competencies fleshed out, were they high or low or whatever, it literally told a story about where he is, what's going on, and that in sharing that with them, it just felt like he moved really quickly to get to that place, to reach these certain personal goals that he wanted to accomplish. I think by and large, because we had that instrument. And so I just started using it clinically. And my wife and I were driving during the pandemic somewhere, and I was sharing with her, going through some of the stories and about emotional intelligence. It was a great story. At the end of it, she said, you know what? It's the pandemic. We don't have any, write a book about it. And I went, okay. Mm-hmm. And that, honestly, that's how it all kind of transpired. The book, though, looks at using the EQI differently than it typically is used today, which is, again, in corporations or with large groups of people. And
Why is
yeah,
it not used clinically? That's what I don't understand. As a
I,
person
yeah,
who's been a client, of therapists,
sure,
and then I've had so
sure.
many on the show, and I look at this and go, this feels foundational to a person's ability to integrate personal change into their lives, even especially relationally with themselves and with others. That this would be a foundational tool.
You're exactly right. I don't know, Kevin. I mean, it's a great question. And, the piece now, what I would like to begin doing is shift the EQI trainings away from corporations and higher ed toward, offering it to those within my world of, the mental health experts and coaches that could begin to look at it and use it. Uh, because if and you went through the book and you saw some of these stories are just unbelievable. And I include these stories because of the difference that this tool really made in the life of an individual.
Yeah.
And it, it's just, it's shocking. So I don't know, but I hope that at some point it would be used more.
Well, I do too. So I'll join you in that
Thank
effort.
you.
I'm shocked that it's not. And I want to get into the specifics of it and even go through, as an example, the story in my report too. I did want to ask you though about you just continued to mention the term empathy in regards to
Yes.
this. That's another one that, I mean, my gosh, I don't think we've ever talked as much about empathy just out here in the marketplace. Empathy is
Yes.
talked about consistently. I
Yes.
also feel like it has been very, uh, people are misled into what empathy is. And if
Yes.
somebody is emotional and if they respond to somebody's emotions, maybe that they are empathetic. And yet it's really even been through my own journey of personal awareness that I've realized that there's an aspect, maybe that's it, is that there's different categories or aspects of empathy. I tend to sense people's emotions very acutely. I'm aware of
Yeah.
that socially. I'll do that.
Yeah.
And somebody who's
That's my sense that you're a really intuitive person.
okay, I think so too.
Yeah.
And yet, so I can sense there's an emotion. However, in my lack of emotional intelligence, I don't know what their emotion is. I may not be able to meet them in that. I can just
Right.
sense something's up. And
Well,
somebody who's, quote, empathetic, I'm saying they're totally missing the cues here. You can read it all over the person.
yes. But
And
but
yeah,
here's the thing with you. You're not you don't lack emotional intelligence. I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to get into it today or whatnot, but you did take the EQI and I sent you the report, and the report, it's a lot of information. I mean, and what I say in the book is that the way the EQI has been used before in the classroom, in the boardroom, is like having a Ferrari and never taking it out of first gear. When you have it in a clinical setting or a coaching setting or being in an executive coaching environment, you can look at and utilize all of that information during the length of the relationship, which to me then it means getting that thing out on the autobahn and ripping through the gears, where just it the power of it is lost
yeah,
because those that are doing whoever goes and does a corporate training or a training at a university college, they only have so much time. These trainers can't spend hours with each person. And so what they try to do is their best of laying some important seeds for the individuals to think about over time. And this is, I, for whatever reason, I look at it and I begin to see really this narrative unfold. So you're not at all emotionally unintelligent. I don't think you give yourself credit, but that's where, if you at some point we'll talk about your competencies, and it's really intriguing to see what's there. You that with the EQI, if you go below 85, okay, just in terms of because it's set up very much to mirror an intelligence test. So 100 is normal or average or whatever you want to call it. And then 15 points either way. So from 100 to 115 it's showing strength. Going the other way, 100 to 85 is showing that there's somewhat of a deficit and you want to be able to talk about it. You didn't have anything below 90. And, 90 going forward suggests a lot of ability.
I had one. Yeah. I had one.
You did? Which one?
I did. I had a 78 in assertiveness.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And which is so, it's interesting because that piece really speaks to a lot of what's going on with the other competencies. And, that if you think, let's say you said, hey, Patrick, I want to become more assertive. Let's just say that was one of your goals. And we talked about it. The thing is, if you imagine hanging from your ceiling a mobile, the kind of mobile that little teeny ones have in their crib, and it's got 15 different things to it and it's completely still. But if you touch one of those 15, what happens? They all move. So youth really drilling down on what it means to be more assertive, in your life will necessarily impact in a way that's positive the other different competencies. But if you look also, so right next to your assertiveness is independence, which is your highest score. So There's independence, right? Then there's assertiveness, and assertiveness 78, your independence 122. And so the thing that is really enjoyable is to be able to have time to talk about what would it be like bringing up your assertiveness, yes. But also, if you look at the independence, that can be what they call, or what is called, an overutilized strength, where as it approaches that higher level, that it all of a sudden is not the positive thing that we think it is. Because let's look at independence for a minute. If somebody is really low in independence, that you would be able to ask them what their life is like. And they would say, if you want to know me, look at my friends, because I do exactly what they do. Right? I don't have my own voice in what is happening socially and in other areas. And then if you travel to the right to 122, that's where you ask people's opinions and you want people's opinions. And but I think it tends to be more overutilized in that when you light on something, you're going to do it no matter what anybody says. Right? And that's what it says. So if you're bringing up your assertiveness and you're stepping up, speaking up more in a way that feels right to you, and you're bringing your emotional independence down, that it's really amazing to see what happens and what it looks like when you become more inclusive. You hear what everybody's doing and you vet it with who it could be within the family, the corporate, it could be anything. And it's really remarkable. And as you're doing it with these two, all these other areas begin to shift as well. How you feel about, who Kevin Miller is in the world, and you're very optimistic, but how optimistic you are in the world, how you solve problems and carry stress. And it's also within that you can carry a lot of stress, which may seem like a good thing. And at times it absolutely is. But then carrying too much stress can kind of bring you to your knees.
And that's a lot of my story and a lot of why we're here talking about emotional intelligence, because I have brought myself to burnout and to bitterness. I want to come back into some of the specifics on the test here. I do want to back up. I mean, at the end of the day, why do we care about emotional intelligence? And you list out, I'm reading it here, well-being,
yes.
Which I don't, at the end of the day, that's what I want. I mean, I want well-being. I want to feel good. And you list it out in 4 parts: well-being. Number 1, self-regard. Number 2, optimism, which you just mentioned. Number 3, interpersonal
Personal relation.
relationships. And number 4, self-actualization. So as I
Yes.
read those, Patrick, I thought what I continue to think about is connection. It is
Right.
connection. I want connection to myself. And the more I increase that, I increase the ability for connection with others. And that encompasses your 4 areas there. And from that, I get well-being. Here I have been so focused on performance in essence most of my life. And I did it and then found myself with a lack of well-being.
Right. Well, and if you look at, so for the audience's sake, let me just paint a picture. Well, let me do 2 things. One is that notion of going back. I haven't really said what I think emotional intelligence is, and it's very brief and it's very simple.
Okay.
But emotional intelligence is very interactive. So, how do I understand my emotions and my feelings? And how do I see those emotions and those feelings impacting the people in my life? That's the first part. The second part to it is, how do I understand and read their emotions and their feelings, and how do they impact me? And so then you kind of, we move a little bit forward. And when I was saying that your independence was your highest or your most overutilized, it's not true. There's the first part of these competencies is self-perception. Kind of, how do we see self? How do we see the world? But it's more really self. And the highest one you had was self-actualization. It's the pursuit of meaning and self-improvement. It's meeting any goal that you really put out there. And that then, when it's at 122, it's that high where self-regard is much lower within it. Emotional self-awareness is lower. And those are the first 3 competencies, right? Self-regard, self-actualization, emotional self-awareness. And you said it, because I looked at that, and that's the first thing that came to my brain is Kevin has burned himself out at different places in different times because it truly is damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead.
Yeah.
And you're going to do it no matter what. And the other competencies kind of gently invite you to slow down. What would it look like if you weren't so overly ambitious? And look, you're a guy with a lot of people that listen to you because you bring important people on your show that can make a difference in the lives of people that are listening. And that's remarkable. However, I think it's probably like anything else. I have no idea what it takes for you to do this. Not at all. And that's often the case to bring this together and to make this happen requires a lot. And so I also think about the EQI, these competencies. When you took the EQI, that was a snapshot, kind of like doing an MRI of where you are socio-emotionally at that moment in time.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're always going to be there. And I think our emotional intelligence, it varies. However, we usually keep it in pretty much a consistent place. And so if you and I were talking and you're in my office and we're looking over your EQI, I would really want to drill down a lot with that piece about just always gunning so hard to achieve the things that you want. And I'm not that doesn't only mean what you're doing in business. It's in relationships. It's just you, right? It's just Kevin Miller going after it. And that what does that self-actualization really look like for you in your life? And if it were to shift or change, what would you like it to truly look like, to truly feel like? And that's where
it comes back to well-being, Patrick. I'm looking at well-being.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking,
Yes.
Again, self-regard, optimism, interpersonal relationships, self-actualization. And at the end of it, I mean, because when you say that, okay, it shows me, I go after it and, full guns and I mean, that sounds like the stuff that our culture would go, yeah, applaud that,
Yeah,
applaud that.
bravo. Yes.
And yet I'm sitting here going, yeah, but I burn out and
Yes.
I was bitter and I hurt relationships. So now I'm sitting here at 50, let's see, I'll soon be turning 54 with with some of the collateral damage. And it's easy to talk about the achievements, but there's collateral damage. My family can tell you about it. My friends can tell you about it. I talk about it, to a good degree here, but I'm here because I'm going, I don't want my kids to do that. I want my kids to find balance
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. And you know what? That piece about our legacy, and our
Yeah.
legacy is really our children if we have children. And, I've obviously written on emotional intelligence. I do trainings on emotional intelligence. And I'm also the guy, when I got pissed off at my son recently, who said, "Are you an idiot?" Right? How damaging is that? And I'm not throwing him out the window, whatever. But in the book, I said that whoever said sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you, was dealing with a really small sample size,
Oh
because
my gosh. Yeah.
that matters. And then I'm sitting.
I want
Right.
to, that one. I know we joke about it, but Patrick, that one, especially for men, I think is one of the most ridiculous statements ever, because sticks and
Absolutely.
stones break my bones. And I don't care. It's actually fun. We brag about it and it's not a big deal, man. It's kind of that thing of, I jump in front of a bullet for my wife. Yeah. But would you have a hard conversation? Nope.
Yeah. Yep. There it is. And it's really interesting. I bring up calling my son or saying, "Are you an idiot?" because the day after, my wife was, saying something to him about thinking more or whatever. And he goes, and he's 9. And he said to my wife, "Yeah, look, Dad already told me I'm an idiot." And I went, "Oh my God." And it's, so what is this whole idea of emotional intelligence? It's something that we strive towards constantly. I said to this earlier, maybe before we were being taped, but I truly do this because being a therapist or a coach or doing trainings, it just makes me a better man. It makes me aware of what's possible because of what other people do. When I was putting together these different stories for the book, I mean, I couldn't put them down. I mean, I had thousands of pages, and I'm looking at it going, "Oh my God." And all of a sudden bringing back the courage of these individuals and what people had to go through. And it's just, it's really remarkable. And so I have a moment like that, and I sit down with my son and I go, "You know what? Who are you looking at right now?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Who are you looking at?" I go, "I'm looking at my dad." I go, "No, you're looking at a flawed human being who I really need to do better, because me saying that to you was absolutely inappropriate." And I said, "My father would say that to me all the time. And I vowed that I would never, ever say something like that to my child."
Wow.
But then look what I did.
Wow.
And because it's in there, it's deep. And it goes back to you and what you do, the podcast. You bring people into the lives of your listeners and viewers that really does feed that wolf of hope of anything is possible. And change can happen if we really want it. But it does mean looking at who we are in the world. How do we react to things or not react to things, as the case may be? And
Let me ask you, here's an important question to me,
right.
Patrick. I'm working on a project as I told you, and looking at emotions, and I'm rereading a book. I'll hold it up for those who are watching the video, Letting Go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So from David Hawkins. So
yes.
I had read it before, but as we evolve, we read things again with new eyes and ears, and reading that. And he's talking about emotions in essence. And here's the statement that this is just in the past week that I hit this, and it hit me for the first time. I'd read it before, I'd underlined it, and I didn't get it. And he says, there's a scientific basis for the observation that self-awareness is increased much more rapidly by observing feelings rather than thoughts. The thoughts associated with even one feeling may literally run into the thousands. Okay. And then he goes on.
Yes. Wow.
Patrick, I have lived a life of thinking. I'll tell you what I think. I'll share with you what I think. I never.
But not what you feel.
Not what I feel. And even then, I still didn't understand it. So I would just replace the words. Yeah, I think you're an idiot. Okay. Well, I know. I feel you're an idiot. I missed it. I didn't get the point. What do I feel? And so there, I found myself talking about it recently with some folks and going, gosh, here we are. We're talking about what we think. And underneath here, and it was actually in regards to some extended family drama that was going off. And I'm looking at it and I knew I can't say I know, but I feel like I know some of the emotions that they're dealing with, but we're not hearing that. And we're up here in these debates about what everybody thinks.
Yes.
And nobody's getting down here and going, there's under that threat, under that frustration, under that, my gosh, if we just went through the election, and under all the vitriol out here is a human with an emotion that is, I feel scared. I feel threatened.
You bet. Yeah. And what's the fear? That's I'm so glad you're bringing it up, because in my own evolution as a person, in ways that you're literally just talking about, that I begin to really look at when someone's going through something, not what is the problem, we look at that too, but what is the fear? Mm-hmm. And, with the election, with the uncertainty of that, with the uncertainty of people that they have with friends or not friends, there's just so much fear driving what's going on. If we were able to get to the fear and to be able to talk about the fear, I just think it would be transformative for all
Patrick,
of us.
Tell me what you think about this, because on fear, the word that that's kept repeating itself to me is threat. And I was asking myself, and it was, gosh, I'll be candid. It was with my wife. It was, marriage therapy. And I'm sitting here talking, the amount of threat that I feel, you would think she had a sword and she was about to decapitate me.
Yes.
And that's not remotely true, but that's how I feel. That's how what on earth is going on with me that I feel that threatened? There's no basis for it. I am not in physical harm's way. And even if if I feel threatened with my ideas or my identity, this is not life threatening. It made no sense to me. So I'm just watching it intellectually going, and I'm feeling it going, I do not understand the threat. So I've been on this path for a while, and I'm looking at everybody and going, oh my gosh, feels like we're at the most threatened society. We would be. It's like, maybe that's why they have the zombie movies, because people inherently, psychologically are feeling that level of threat to, again, it's not, we don't have zombies. It's not a physical threat. It is to our identity, our ideas.
And that also, that ability, I think you're also touching on something really important, is how do we understand the people around us, how they interpret threat or how they interpret fear I had a situation 2 weeks ago. I'm walking with my daughter, she's 10, and we parked the car and I'm walking her to a class that she has on Saturdays. And I parked the car. There's all these different events happening at this school. So finding parking was tough. So I had to park in a place that typically people don't park. I get out and we're walking, and there's a guy there talking to me. And at first I'm talking with him, and then it becomes apparent that he's giving me a hard time about parking there and that I should go move my car. Now, it's not a no parking zone. I don't know why he was so wound up. But we're walking, and my daughter, who's 10, is next to me. And I said to him, if I really want your opinion, I'm going to ask you for it. And we kept walking. And then he's getting a little bit more riled up. And he goes, "This is my school." And I looked at him and I said, that explains it. What grade are you in? Now, this is a junior high school. And, that probably didn't help this interaction very much. And, one thing led to another. I walked away and that it was over. But yesterday, this is 2 weeks after, I'm sitting with my daughter and we're talking, and it was very apparent she was really afraid. I'm walking, this guy's threatening. I mean, not threatening me directly, but he was a threatening kind of person. And I just had no idea because, well, I took her to her class and she said, "Oh, Papa, that was a really funny comeback. Oh, what grade are you in?" But just completely overlooking this little person being very afraid. And then we started to break down the fears, the fear of me being hurt, the fear of me being in trouble, the fear of her being hurt. And I felt like I could play handball with the curb at that moment. I'm going, what the hell? And it goes back to exactly what you're saying about who we are as men. What's this notion of masculinity? How do we deal with it? And it's like these two roosters that are just kind of dancing with one another. And what I did with my wife and my daughter and me, we talked about what I could have done different. And it goes back to you talking about feeling, that it felt just so alien at first. And talking about it, I was able to say, it feels so alien to me that I would not have hit this guy. I would not have done any of that. It would have been shut down way before that. But my daughter doesn't know that. I mean, she just doesn't know it. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, you know what? It's not a script. It's not what I just described. It's much bigger and wider. And I think it invites us to this place of being aware at a very different level. And you know what? It's the level you're now in. You've been through more than anybody could know. There have been wonderful times and times that have been very challenging. But now you're in a place, if I think anyway, of really evaluating who you are in the world.
Yeah.
As a guy, as a dad, as a spouse, it goes on, as an employer, and the only thing I can say to that is what a beautiful, remarkable place to be. What an opportunity. Because sometimes it's not going to feel very good. However, on the other side of it, and in my time, I've been fortunate to talk with you. It's very apparent that you get it. That doesn't mean you're going to be canonized a saint next week. No, it means though that awareness about others and stemming from the awareness about self, it's huge, Kevin. It goes back to what you said before. Can you really be empathic to other people if you're not empathic to yourself? And that you are in the space of self-empathy.
Well, thank you. Okay. I'm gonna thank you. I do feel like I'm getting it in a lot of ways, but now I'm looking at integrating it. How do I integrate it? Because I'm so aware, increasingly aware of how I can get something, but not integrate it. I've got the knowledge. I even got the understanding, but now how to integrate it, and I can miss it, just as you said, and call my kid an idiot. And I've been looking at it, we can play around with terms, but to some degree, of course we say aware, self-aware,
right?
But to think, am I being conscious or unconscious? When I'm just on autopilot, I'm unconscious. God help me. What goes out when I can come over here and all of a sudden click in, it's like different glasses. And all of a sudden I'm watching my kids different, and I'm watching my friends, and I'm watching people, and I'm tuned into somebody is feeling something. You can watch it. I can see it in their facial expressions. I can see it in their posture. I can see it in their changes. And then I can see how I can alter it. And of course, same thing with myself, to look at myself and going, oh my gosh, I am feeling X, especially as a negative emotion. I'm going, X, why is that? What is it? And backing up going, oh, it was that. And now I'm backing in to understand so I can come back here. And like you said, it's not like it fixes everything, but immediately, but to some degree, it helps me. And that's my preface, Patrick, to a word that I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
We're talking a lot in the book. You talk about so many stories, and you talk about the challenges they are facing. You start off with that, with your friend, another professor who kind of asked people a question, and it brought up all these challenges that with what I am seeing with emotional intelligence is it helps me to go in and understand myself, first of all, and to look at that. And to some degree, the word I'm coming to is resolve.
Mm.
And I wanted to ask you, is that for me to look at something and resolve doesn't mean it goes away. It doesn't mean the pain, the grieving, the whatever goes away. But when I can understand it, there's some aspect of a resolution that I can make peace with.
Right.
And that's what
Right.
allows me then to be conscious with somebody else.
Sure. And that's the word that just came to my brain when you're saying it is being able, it is an awareness, this feeling of resolve. And it's truly an elevated understanding that uh, there's so many different interactions that we have every day with people, and always trying to think about the interaction. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it working? I think can be exhausting for really anybody. It's more that, well, when you say you come to a resolution or resolve, what comes up for you in terms of interaction with people?
If I feel resolved kind of in and of myself, you mean?
Yes.
It gives me the capacity to be there because I'm not threatened.
Right.
That's what I come to. When I feel threatened, it's because of a lack in me. And because I'm looking intellectually and going, I shouldn't feel threatened, but I do. And I'm looking at what is in me that's unresolved that is causing that threat. If I can resolve it and understand myself, understand my own emotions, whatever, what I'm feeling, and go, okay, then I'm not threatened, and I can talk freely with you, whether you're being nice or a jerk or whatever. I'm not really triggered in
Right.
essence.
Right. And the being able to feel resolve. Well, if I can just tell a quick story that kind
Please.
of comes out of the book, but it's about a woman that came in, and the first thing she said to me when she sat down, she goes, "It's not that I think my parents preferred my twin brothers over me. It was just an absolute blatant fact."
Hmm.
And she began to describe it. And she said there was this one time that her mother's sister, her aunt, came into town, and they were all going to go to the circus. And she was really excited about it. And the father came over to her and gave her $10 and said, "Order a pizza. Your aunt is going to go with us because there's not enough people. There's not enough seats in the car." And she was stunned. And she wasn't so much stunned that her father did that. It was more that the aunt didn't say anything, like, "Oh, no, 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 no. You guys go. I'm just going to be here. It's okay." And that when that happened, the twin brothers did a high five and, just said something derogatory to her. And they get in the car and they leave. And there she is at home alone and scarred even deeper than she was an hour before that.
Yeah.
And she wanted to run away. She got a pillowcase and put stuff in it, and then sat on the bed just crying uncontrollably because she had nowhere to go and no one would care. And how do you resolve in our hearts that piece of feeling not wanted and uncared for? And so she went through her life. She's very smart. She became a software engineer, and therefore picked a profession where she really didn't have to interact with people. And so she took the EQI, and we began talking, and she began, before taking social risks, which she did, she began to see herself different and differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared with her the story. I said, a buddy of mine once said to me that most of our life we carry around this satchel that other people put a lot of crap in that's not ours. And then there's this point in our adulthood where we spend a lot of our time reaching in and taking the crap out that's not ours.
Hmm.
And I said to her, a lot of what's been in your satchel is not yours. And I'd love to know, what do you want to be in that satchel? What do you want it to look like? And she slowly began to see just how beautiful she was as a person, her personal self-worth, and began moving toward being resolved to the fact that she's really good, that came through a really bad traumatic experience somehow. And she began to resolve herself to the fact that she's incredibly resilient. And so I'm not sure if that's the way that you necessarily.
I want to ask, Pat,
Okay,
on
yes.
that. Let's use that example. That with that, I am interested in, especially with children,
Yes.
and the traumas that happen as children. So for everybody's listening, for us, that we have these things that happen, and especially as kids, and we can come up to it as adults, but especially as kids, that when that, like in that instance, when that happened to her with her family being, let's call it minimized, marginalized, neglected in essence,
Yes. Yes.
neglected, what we as humans, what she did, I assume, and what we as humans tend to do is we attach meaning about that to us. What does that mean about us? And that's what she took forward. And
Yes.
the resolution that I'm interested in resolving is going back now and saying, I interpreted that. She interpreted that it had meaning to her. And now to go back and go to how old do you know? How old was she? Do you know?
She was 32.
No. Well, as a kid, when that happened.
Oh, she was 10. She was 10. My daughter's age.
That
Yes.
at 10 years old, that happened, and she interpreted it as it meant something bad about her. To now go back with this awareness and go, it didn't say something about her. It said something about her parents and her family. Yes. You tell me your thoughts, because my thought is that is a possibility of resolution, to go back and interpret and realize it didn't mean anything about her. It meant something about them.
Right.
And she can kind of take that out of her bag, as you said, take that.
Absolutely. Out. And the beautiful part of kind of what you're saying, it's this healing mechanism.
Yeah.
It's being, and it goes back, there's this guy White that does this thing about narrative therapy. And what you're suggesting, which I do, and I think it's incredibly powerful, is you change the narrative. And in that, not that, oh, she grew up in a beautiful family, but that what she ascribed badness to, which is herself, she's able to shift it and go, no, that I didn't ask for that. I didn't do anything at all to deserve that. And she, and it's that piece that she was able to come to this place of recognizing she deserved to live a life she really wanted. And that the life that she really wanted as it came to be lived in a very rich way in her mind, like a fairy tale, but it was only in her mind.
I want to walk through that then. I'm going to try to connect the dots so I understand, Patrick.
Absolutely.
If she has that wound, again, she attached meaning, a negative meaning towards herself because of that back at 10 years old.
Yes.
And what would you, not to give it I struggle with labels, but to give it some kind of a label, would you say neglect or abandonment? What was the key feeling that she
completely, because I hear what you're saying about the labeling, but you know what? You're right, because there's a very popular kind of wave going through our culture looking at attachment theory. Like, I'm an anxious attachment type, or I'm, a neurotic attachment type, or whatever, the avoidant attachment. And it's in the popular press, but it's very real. And that how we attach to people is driven by the experiences that we've had. And she did not attach to anybody that was human. She would attach to a cat, she attached to a bird, but she didn't attach to a person. Because beginning to open up and potentially attach to someone meant very real pain. And that she's flawed, in her opinion, so they'll see that flaw quick enough, and it's just going to be more pain. And it's that abandonment is real. And it's something that so many people feel, though they don't think about it that way. They think about it differently. And so for them, what you do is that there's this reality that they went through or that they feel. And that what would it look like and feel like for them to begin to create a life where they were able to stay away from abandonment to the best of their ability? And what would it look like? And it often means for most of us to do something like that, we have to take risk. We have to take social risk. We have to take relational risk. And the risk part is that this person could love you and then stop loving you.
Yeah.
Or, this person could marry you and love you and then have an affair on you. That it goes all kinds of different directions. It is more, though, it goes back to your notion of intuition. And most people, when they're in a bad situation, they intuitively know it. And they may not know what to do with it, but they know it. And giving people permission that the moment they feel something is not right, to have a way to deal with it in a way that feels powerful to them. And I mean, the abandonment piece is big and it's real to your.
And that's where I'm looking at those pieces. Yeah. If she feels this abandonment thing is here and it is unresolved, I'm sensitive to using that because it doesn't mean it's eradicated, but there's some resolution. She's able to connect with that and be emotionally intelligent, understand it, resolve it, remove it. It didn't mean something about her. It meant something about them. And she can have that resolution. Now she can go forward, like you said, and take the risk of another relationship.
Yes.
Because and it's a person and they may, quote, abandon her. But if she knows that her, well, I was going to say self-worth.
Her self-worth. Yeah. No, what you're saying is right on. That, and thank you for bringing that back around, because if she finds herself with someone and they abandon her, that through the way she's seeing her life, the lens now that she looks through, it's not about her. If she drove this person away through aberrant behavior, she's got to own it, kind of back to the Stoics taking responsibility. If not, if this person just broke her heart or whatever it is, to be able to know it's not about her. And that's the important part. And, people that fear abandonment, they feel things deeply and they can sense when something's not right. They often, though, don't do anything with it because of the fear, right? Oh, if I say something to him or her, they'll leave me. And so I really can't say anything. So I've got to keep it in. And this notion of understanding emotion and being emotionally intelligent is you absolutely say something. And what do you think you would say? How would it feel? What would you want to hear or need to hear that would feel integrative or feel resolved with what's happening? And, it would be great if it was binary, like resolved, not resolved. It tends to be a little bit more tricky than that.
I'm thinking as you talk, Patrick, because you've used the word a few times, risk, and I'm aligning it with, I've been really focused on threat, as I said, but I like looking at it at risk to say, if I do this, as you're talking about, like if she steps out and if I do take the risk of pursuing another relationship, well, what is the risk? What is the risk? What's the worst thing that could happen? They could leave me and tell me to get a pizza, back to my childhood. They could do that. Can I withstand that? If I can, man, the risk is lessened, to go through that. Go ahead.
Right. But again, what you're bringing up, it's important. When I talk about risk with clients or whomever, I don't just ask, can you take the risk? I create a 3D model of what that risk would look like for them to step into it. What does it feel like? All right. What do you do when you have this feeling? What do you do when you have that feeling? How do you take care of yourself in moments of uncertainty, emotional uncertainty. Maybe this person's not aware of what the other person is feeling or going through. How do you ask? I mean, when we have adults that are in the world, professional, however, their spirit was broken, or their spirit was in the place of being broken. It takes a lot to be able to step into taking the kind of risk that you talk about or that I talk about. So when I kind of build with them, not just Patrick, but with them, when I build this structure, this three-dimensional structure, this sculpture of them moving forward, it's really important because they're stepping into an emotional space and place that can be terrifying for them. And if they're allowed to feel it, in this moment before actually stepping into it, they're able to know and I think embrace their resilience. If you read the book, people went through things that just it almost didn't even feel real to me, and yet it was.
Is it almost, as you're speaking it, in my head, I was thinking risk assessment. Is that?
Yes. Okay. That's it. That's exactly it. Not done in the way that we do in the FBI or, within police force and so forth, but it absolutely is a risk assessment. And because that risk, it lives in the emotional world, it's not in the intellectual world. We've got to get it to the emotional space to be able to say, okay, what would it really be like? There was a young woman that came in to see me a year after her brother suicided, and her brother was just everything to her. He was a beautiful man, and he was a beautiful man who felt very tortured because of depression and other things. And when she came to see me, life had gone from these beautiful radiant colors to just black and white and gray, and that was kind of it. She had no appetite for life. And as she was able to talk about her brother and how remarkable this young guy was, and he truly was a remarkable guy, she was able to begin to pull from that the importance of who he is in her life. That importance didn't die with him. Yeah. It exists within her. And letting it grow and letting it get bigger and letting her to begin to live the life certainly that her brother would have wanted to see and believed in with her. And we're all here for it's time limited. We have a time stamp on each one of us here. And she was able to begin to really consider how she wanted to leave it. And it was funny. She was, in the beginning, she said, she's an attorney. And in the beginning, she said, I have a great job. It's the best job in the universe. But by the time she began to really take who she is in the world far more, to see it as far more important. And what she got from her brother is far more enduring. One day she said to me, I know this is going to kind of fly in the face of what I said before. However, my job sucks. The people I work with are really boring, and I am miserable there. I said, oh, so what do you want to do? Where do you want to go with it? And literally within a month, she was in a new place, really using her talents and abilities, and she just kind of blossomed. And part of it, I think, to go back to what you said earlier, Kevin, it's about people really feeling it's okay to talk about their life. It's okay to share their narrative. It's okay to share their fears. So it's okay to share all of this stuff, and it's not going to kill them. And in fact, in doing so, it allows them to begin to see their strengths in a very, very different way. And I think that's what it's all about, right? In the world of mental health or coaching, it's about doing your absolute best for people to reacquaint themselves or acquaint themselves with these remarkable strengths that they have that have just been, either not utilized or woefully underutilized in their life.
I'm thinking, Patrick, as you're talking, that the strengths or the weaknesses. I really
Yes.
appreciate you sharing that with her, of her going, oh, I got a great job, and then not so long afterwards, no, my job sucks. I concern myself a lot with that perspective of where am I? My best friend's an MD, and he says the most dangerous thing is we don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And looking at
Yes.
that going, where am I kidding myself? Where am I living in an illusion? Because I look back and I really thought some things were working for me that weren't. And I was just unaware of myself, of the collateral damage in essence. And I didn't know it until later, which is why I'm pointing over here on my screen because I've got the EQI, mine up. And I love being able to look at it and go, okay, the highs, those are great. But the lows, again, keep my self-worth intact.
Right.
I'm not going to let them make me feel bad about myself, but go, well, if that's a low, now I didn't know. And that makes sense that I can address that now and stop the illusion over here. Stop the, one of the things that you wrote in the book, it was one of your stories. I'd have to waste time to go, maybe I will over here. You said, you know what? I'm going to read what you wrote. Bear with me. You said, so what can we do about what happened to us? Carry the weight until we can simply go no further? Carry it until what is left in our wake are broken relationships, obsessions, addictions, and mere fragments of what was possible, all based on incomprehensible internal and external woundedness. That's what I pulled out because it's those seemingly little things that we don't know that are, and what I wrote in the edge on the side here was, it is going to manifest. And that's my story, Patrick. And that's again, why I'm here and why I'm so interested in this, because it feels vital, because I didn't know what I didn't know until it came out and screamed at me. And, I'm recording this from my home, which I don't often do. I'm not in my fancy studio. I just felt like I don't know. My vibe was just a little more personal.
So cool.
I'll give you credit on that. And I wanted to be here at the house. And I was on one of my driveways across the way here, going across, and I realized how bitter I was. I was doing something for a kid that they had not asked me to do. I was just trying to be Superman and fix everything. I had just heard a whisper of some need, and I was bitter. And, I'm 45 or 47 or whatever at the time, and thinking, how did I get here? I never looked at myself, and it was that I was just carrying it. It was that paragraph I just read of yours. I was carrying along, and I carried it until I couldn't. Yeah. And then there's the collateral damage, which is a lot harder to deal with than seeing it now and, early and warding it off in the future.
Yeah. And particularly for men in the world, is to literally ask for help. I mean, that's anathema to most guys, men, boys. You don't ask for help. You do it, and you do it with your own knowledge and so forth. And I'm forgetting right now, it's just completely flown out of my brain who said it, but there was a quote that, we really don't know who we are. And I bring that quote up because you're in this place, and I think you've been in this pursuit for a very long time, to really ask yourself consistently, continually, with a very gentle voice, who's Kevin Miller? Who is it? About being a dad, about, being a professional, about, what is it really about? I bring it up because who Patrick is or who Kevin is, it's constantly evolving. It's not static. It's not, oh, I am a psychologist, or, oh, I am a teacher, or, oh, I am a whatever, or I'm a dad, or, we're all those things and then more. And sometimes, I reflect, and I'll actually, this morning with my wife, what I said, we were talking, and I said, do you know, I feel in my life right now that I have no time, that everything is so demanding. And she looked at me, she said, you know what? You're going to have to figure that out. How do you get yourself time? She goes, I can't do it for you. Because anytime I try to take something, you say no. and which was a very beautiful dig, and it worked, where I had to say, you know what, you're absolutely right. This is ridiculous. And it's this piece of, I'm doing these things, all of which, like you, I really enjoy. I feel incredible gratitude for. And yet that also that piece of being able to know Patrick or spend time just with Patrick, is 15 minutes before I go to bed or before I fall asleep. And that it's so right now, for whatever reason, for me, there's this kind of breaking the surface of the water, a need to have more time just with me. And because something's there, something's going on. And for us to so typically what I would probably do is just keep it to myself and work it out, talk to my therapist, whatever it might be. But I mentioned it to my wife, and she, who knows me better than anybody, she was able to really go, you know what? You do need this. You got to figure this out. You've got to do something with it. And that for me was really helpful.
Well, two things. One, I relate. I spoke to a friend first, and I think I mentioned it to my wife, that I was struggling with the lack of time and just too many responsibilities in essence. Sure. And, as you know, I've got 9 kids. That's on me, but to look at that and go, do I regret having them or regret any of them? No, but there's some aspect of, and the thought that came to mind is, imagine being down where I'm out here in the mountains, down in the canyon, and you find just a wealth of gold, and you pick up bags and bags and bags, and you're going along. It's great. You got gold. You can't complain. But it's too much.
It's too much.
Just can't carry it.
Right. And that's the beauty of it. When do we realize we're outpacing ourselves? We're in a sprint. We need to be in a jog. And but what you said, I think, is just so perfect. I'm not buried under stuff I don't want to do. Yeah. Everything that I'm doing, I feel intensely grateful for. But within it, though, I'm sprinting past me. I'm not having that time for me to reflect, to really look at what's happening and what's going on. Who am I as a dad? Who am I as a colleague or whatever it is? And it's all flying. And I'll tell you something really quick. When I took the EQI the first time, which is 15 years ago, the woman gave it to me, who was part of this training program. And my highest score was in assertiveness. And I was, this is great. And she starts talking about assertiveness and talking with me. And I start getting really uncomfortable. And she goes, why are you getting uncomfortable? I said, well, I don't like the direction this is going because the assertiveness doesn't sound like a good thing. She said, well, based on kind of your EQI and what's going on, it's not. I said, well, what do you mean it's not? She said, describe to me somebody who has really, really low assertiveness. And I said, well, maybe we can feel like a human doormat. She goes, yeah. Describe to me somebody who has really high assertiveness. And I looked at her and she goes, no, come on. And I went, yeah, pain in the ass, aggressive, unyielding. And she said, yeah. She goes, is that you? And I went, in most of my life, no. However, being at a university, you're in all kinds of groups and doing all kinds of projects. And I said, when I'm in a group with people that are moving slower than me or aren't getting it or doing their work, I become literally a tyrant. And she said, how does that work out? I said, not very well. And so I came back to Georgetown. I was in a staff meeting with people, and I said, do you ever notice me in groups being a pain in the ass and not listening to people or being a bully? They go, yeah. I said, well, don't you think that you might have wanted to say something to me about it? Because for whatever reason, I just wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. They said, well, your other attributes, and most of the time, you're not anything like that. You're just you're enjoyable. And I just went, God, how is it possible with all the work that I do on me and that could have escaped me. It's so easy for all of us. Because there's always something grabbing our attention, grabbing our ability, grabbing our talent, grabbing our time, where that ability to slow down. And that's what I realized 15 years ago at that moment with that woman. I have to pay attention more to me because I wasn't. And it was humbling. It felt humbling to me.
Well, credit. It's interesting you pulled that analogy out, Patrick, because, on the assertiveness, because that was my lowest one. So yeah, if you said, what did you say is kind of the mid range, 100?
Yeah, but you're past 100 is always the mid range. Exactly.
Okay. So, and I was 78, so that was my lowest one. And what you just said, if you're in a group, it's not moving fast enough, you become a tyrant.
Right.
If I'm in a group, it's not fast enough or it's getting cumbersome, I abandon.
Right.
I try to assert myself. I'm out, and I go over to independence, which is my second highest, and I just go do it on my own.
Right.
Pros and cons of that, but I've got a lot of and so if you talk to the groups that I'm involved with, they said, yeah, if Kevin's likely to check out, and then he won't collaborate, and he just goes off and does his own thing and doesn't tell us, and there's the friction, and I've burnt a lot of bridges with that.
Well, and I didn't realize it, but there are a lot of people that weren't too terribly crazy about me that I would work with periodically. Mm-hmm. And when they heard, Kilcar's in the group, they would go, I can imagine, they would go, oh my God, because I was, I wasn't a tyrant, but it was just, I just felt like I don't want my time wasted. And, but that recognition that you're talking about, it's huge. And so, I began to think about what does it look like as I back that down and I become more truly integrated with the group, and that I become an asset rather than a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And it's that same kind of thing that if somebody has a 78 in assertiveness, it would be, well, what do you want it to be? Well, I'd like it to be 100, kind of just, middle of the road, exactly where it needs to be. And then we talk about how you get there. What does that really look like? And how do you employ it? And what are the obstacles? If you start kind of feeling better and your assertiveness really feels better, what can get in the way? Because of the whole notion, under stress, we regress. And it's very true, that I may be doing really well, but if the stress kind of peaks at a certain level that's uncomfortable, I'll revert back probably to that tyrant kind of guy. So it's always being able to keep that in front of me. And what can get in the way? What can make me, quote unquote, regress to maybe a behavior that I don't want or a competency that I don't want?
Well, again, the concept here, we're talking about emotional intelligence, / awareness.
Yes.
And when I look at that, I'm looking at my profile here and thinking what I did is crafted my life around fitting that. So I have been on my own, entrepreneur, but
sure.
I don't have employees for the most part, independent contractors. And I've stayed in that place where I can be autonomous. So to some degree, I'd look at that and go, okay, well, I can change it, or I can just adapt and say, I'm going to adapt my life so that works. I've done that, but things have changed. And now I'm in a place where I want things done. I'll give credit to Arthur Brooks on strength to strength. Some of the things that in the past I would have said, well, yeah, I'm just going to do it myself. I want it done. I just don't want to do it anymore. I've got a different energy. Right. I want to work within my crystallized knowledge, not my fluid. I don't want to go build that thing. So I need other people. So now I'm looking at that and going, I want to change that.
Yeah.
I want to.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of it. You're looking at it and going, I want to change it, and I want it to be different. And it's, I relate with virtually everything that you've talked about, and particularly that piece. I'm at a point in my life right now. My wife said something the other day, like, why don't you go do this? I don't know, maybe it was I was asked to do a half-day workshop about the book and so forth. And it was on a Saturday, and I said to her, no, I don't think I want to do that. Instead, there's two people that I work with, and I said, I'm going to invite them to go do it. And where before I would just rush out and do it, because it was fun, it was enjoyable. But then I was thinking this piece about, well, if I take off on Saturday, then I'm missing what the kids are doing.
Yeah.
And, and I feel like my energy, to your point, is shifting. And you're just aware of that. I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse. That's really a remarkable pulse to feel about who you are in the world. I mean, you've got a whole lot of responsibility. I mean, just start with 9 kids and go from there. It's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of love, a lot of stuff. And as you do get older, where do we want our talents and abilities and time to go? And I think you're in that beautiful, fluid place right now of being able to go, okay, what do I want to be doing?
Okay, you've used that word a couple of times, which I am so grateful for, because Patrick, you're hitting on a focal point of mine right now, looking at even the concept of objective reality and fixed reality that I
Right.
no longer believe in, and
Right.
I'm really putting my focus on that we are fluid, and I feel more capacity to do that when I am emotionally intelligent. I understand the core of myself, so I can evolve and be fluid with that. And I'm not just a fixed entity, and on that, when, you said you took your first EQI 15 years ago ish.
Yes.
I guess it's a two-part or a two-sided question, I guess. Is one, have you seen yours change? Let me just stop there. I'll stop there first. Have you seen yours change?
I have.
Okay.
So the last time I took it was 2 years ago. No, it was 18 months ago. And for me, assertiveness is now around 105. It used to be 125.
Wow.
And that was my highest competency. Social responsibility, which is one of the competencies, and social responsibility is about doing things for your community, being there for other people. It's lower for me now, which may sound like a bad thing. In fact, for me, it's not, because it used to be not as high as assertiveness, but it was high where I was doing all these things. And as I, just learned in my own therapy over time, I do a lot of things out of distraction. And so that goes back to trying to get more time for me. So that social responsibility has gone back and is also 105. I mean, they're now the same, where it used to be 120. And so I've seen it's really a wonderful question, because I've seen the shift in my EQI to move in the direction where I really put my thoughts, where I put my energy, and the things that I want to do or want to do differently. And, in the book, there are a couple situations where there is a before and after, where somebody takes the EQI and then, a year later or 6 months later, they take it again. And it's very, very different. And that's because, these are individuals that were just doing the heavy lifting, and that it meant a lot to them. And they had a sense of the journey they'd been on, and then the journey they wanted to take. And so, with our talking, that they are able to sculpt, again, if you will, more and more, moving toward the kind of person that they really wanted to be in the world. And so, yeah, it shifts for sure.
Well, one, we're going to do another show. I want to talk through mine, and I want people to hear it. So I'll put that out there. I think if you're game,
Great.
We talked about that we'll do that, because I'm not ready to jump in there yet. There's something you said a minute ago that never occurred to me, or a thought came from it that it never occurred to me. And you talked about, it was in the aspect of asking for help.
Yes.
That we as humans don't tend to do that well. Men are even tend to be even worse with that. I never thought about it, Patrick, but I thought, I wonder how often I and men and people tend to struggle to ask for help, because we don't even know what we need.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, and then you shared what you did with your wife.
Yes.
You didn't ask her for help, but you did divulge the problem. I
Yes.
am struggling. You came out. So you were vulnerable in that aspect. You were vulnerable to say, here's where I'm struggling.
Yes.
And from that, she was able to point something out that you can now address for help. I just
Yes.
hadn't thought about it that way. And I thought, I wonder how many times I don't ask for help and I make it worse because I don't know what to ask for help with. I don't know what to ask. What if I went to my, guy, I've got some guys that I kind of do life with and just said, I don't know what to ask for, but here's the problem.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
And the this past weekend, I was in the basement cleaning something up, and it was a big job. And I'm down here grunting and moaning, and my wife just kind of calls down from upstairs. She goes, just FYI, you have 3 kids. And I said, okay, got it. I rustled them up, brought them down, and we had a great time. I mean, we were able to, knock it out. But I don't think I would have thought of that. I just, because, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it done. I want to do it my way. And, there's this piece and those listening to this, watching this will understand if you have kids. Oftentimes as a parent, you want to do it and get it done your way because you don't want to have that whole learning moment happen with involving your child. And my wife didn't need to say anything about that, but because I'm aware of it, we came down and it was fun, And I guess she heard me moaning. I don't know what she heard me doing, but it was enjoyable, and it's that piece. What does it mean for us, whoever's listening? What does it mean to ask for help? And that may be literally, can you help me?
Yeah.
Or sharing something with someone, which indicates you're inviting them to weigh in on whatever it is.
Patrick, I so interest myself with your analogy there because we're coming upon Thanksgiving and my mother-in-law comes and stays a week with us. And last year I had one of the worst accidents I've ever had, a physical accident in a couple months before that. And during the time when we're usually doing wood. So I've got property here and we cut down the standing dead wood and fill up our fireplace.
Right.
We had none. She came to our house up in the mountains. We had no wood for the fire. I mean, we got heat.
Because you couldn't cut it.
No wood because I couldn't cut it. And she says, don't you have kids? Don't they usually help? And I said, yeah, but I always spearhead it. They do help. I mean, I get my boys and the girls even out there with chainsaws and whatever, but I spearhead it. And so it took me back to emotional intelligence going, why did I not do that? They always help. It's not that they don't help, but I realized my role has always been, I spearhead it and I just tell them what to do, to tell them to go out there and man it all. I missed that part of my own role and didn't adjust because of my lack of awareness.
Right. And you know what you just said, I think is just so huge. It's not that you didn't want to ask for help. It just did not dawn on you that, wow, you know what? I can give direction. The kids can go do it. And because your role and it's very much the same thing. And for all of us listening, how can we look at our roles differently and maybe be even more inclusive, inviting the kids, family, whatever, to be involved in things that we typically spearheaded, to use your point, because it's not that you were being this guy that wasn't going to ask for help. Not at all. It just didn't even pop up on your screen, which is it. And that's societal, that comes from, do it yourself. And if you can't do it yourself, just don't, it's not going to get done.
You said something there that it brought up another question. I think it was Terry Real, Terry, therapist. Yeah. I think it was his, well, actually, I don't remember. We had him on the show. I don't know. It was in the show or in his book, Us. I don't remember. But he talked about a guy, it was a patient of his who, I'll paraphrase it. In essence, he's kind of depicting the guy. And the guy said, you know what? In and of myself, I'm kind of good with how I am. I'm kind of fine with me. I'm not struggling with me. I'm not, But in relation to others, some things aren't working. And Terry's like, well, then you either stay on your own, or if you want to be in connection, I'm going to use that word, with others, you're going to have to alter. It really struck me because I thought, like, in and of myself, I'm okay. I'm not really struggling or suffering, but in relation to others, I am. And something you just said, when I look at emotional intelligence, I'm thinking, okay, in and of myself, I don't know that I need anything more, but it's in relation to others where I'm suffering, where I hit the wall, where I'm hitting the lack, and I don't know what I don't know.
In terms of that, and also to give the listeners, viewers, a little bit of a different slant on this. 2 weeks ago, I had somebody come in. We did the EQI. We're going through it, and his score was 70 on assertiveness, right? And we were talking about it. We're looking at it, his own growth. And when it came, and that was his lowest score. And when it came to talking about it, he said, listen, I'm fine with where the assertiveness is. I don't want to change that right now. And I said, look, the map is yours. We're going to go any direction you want. And I said, but can I ask, what is it that would suggest that that's fine right now and you don't want to shift or change it? He goes, the thought of making changes, and this is in relation to him growing up, the thought of making changes with this right now creates too much anxiety for me. He said, however, I want to get at this at some point, but it's not now. And I said, all right. I said, where do you want to take all this? And it's sometimes, and I've even had people say, you know what, I'm okay with that. I've had people with 125 independents, CEOs of companies say, I don't want to change that. And I said, well, okay. If you look at the larger tapestry of emotional intelligence, something like this can get in the way. And how do you manage it when it gets in the way? And so we would go down fruitful discussions, but this is somebody, he just didn't want that to be different for a variety of reasons. And with a CEO and so forth, it's doing a program. So I get one, maybe two sessions with this person, and then that's it. And so it leaves me a bit frustrated, but.
Yeah, I was just say give them Arthur Brooks' Strength to Strength book and let them look what they're coming to. They're gonna hit the wall of that fluid.
I'm gonna write it down because you're right. I don't want to forget that one.
That's interesting. Oh my goodness. Okay, I do want people to hear that we never even got into the meat of the EQI, and I want them to hear that because I actually want to hear them. Have you counsel me through some of that and help me understand, just like that. If you match up my low assertiveness with my high independence, what's up with that? Cause I never saw that. And I thought, oh, that's why I abandon groups and then go do it myself and then look at the pros and cons of that. And I think in the past wasn't so bad. Well, there was some damage, but now, man, I want that to change. And I'm wondering, okay, what else do I not see in here? So I think we got a part 2 coming up.
Yeah, let's do it. And there's only one time in all of my time of being fortunate to do this work, I had a woman come in. She was 25, and she said, my life is great. I have great friends. I have a boy, but life is super. And I don't feel right. I don't feel good. I don't feel balanced. She took the EQI. I sent it to her the day before to look at. And it's the only time that someone came in and looked at the EQI exactly the way that I did. Because when I see it, as I've said before, it tells a story. And she came in and she was really quiet. She was teary. And I said, what's going on? Because she had never been teary prior to that. She goes, I read the EQI. And I said, well, let's look at it. We put it up. And what she saw was emotional self-awareness was really high. Okay. And then below emotional self-awareness is emotional self-expression, which was really low. Right. So she's very aware of emotionally what's happening in her world, and she expresses it very, very infrequently.
That's me.
Right. So then, well, no, that's not that. No, you're kind of close with
Oh, you're
expression.
right. You're right. I'm looking at
Yeah.
the wrong one. You're right.
No, no,
Mind
no.
over body equal.
No, you're
You're
pretty
right.
good. And it's that if um, you travel farther down, and there's one kind of what. Let me just call it really quick. Hold on. That so you go down and flexibility.
Yeah.
So she looked at flexibility, and her flexibility was really high, and which meant that you you know whatever somebody's up for, she's going to do,
Mm.
and she has great friends, and she really loves her friends. And then you go down to stress tolerance was really high, and I looked at it and I said, "So what does that say to you?" She goes, "I am a human doormat. My friends, I am the resident therapist. Everybody comes to me, everybody talks to me, everybody wants me to solve
Yeah.
problems. Nobody ever asks about what I want or what I need or what I'm feeling or what's going on. They just see me as this kind of a donkey or a Sherpa that just can carry this amazing amount, and I'm all good. And nobody really knows me." And that's where this high awareness, low expression, she doesn't talk
Hmm.
with anybody, and that's what she's kind of learned. And at high flexibility, she'll do whatever anybody's doing. She's not going to push the limits, and she can carry a lot of stress, which is everybody's burdens. And things just really changed in a pretty remarkable way with her to live that life that felt more balanced. And it took time, and it took, to your point earlier, risk. But it's just amazing what these funny little 15 competencies can say to us.
Well, and yeah, because I'm looking at it and I'm going, and this is why I want to go through it with you. I'm wondering, out of these, as you look at these, I'm looking at causation for anxiety,
Oh,
for insecurity, for, as we talked about before, the things that trigger me. And I'm looking and going, why on earth is that? And I don't understand why. That I'm
right.
looking at this and going, this is going to give me kind of an understanding that I think you'll see and go, makes sense. Because you're
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
X, Y, 1 + 1 = you're a human doormat. 1 + 1 = you're taking too much stress on. And getting to
Yeah.
where I am intelligent with those, because I don't want those things to exist. I don't want the
Yeah.
anxiety. I don't want the triggers. I don't want the insecurities.
And that's the beauty of it, that, you stumble across my book, you're cleaning out a closet, boom, there it is. And it leads to this. And
Yeah,
it's for a reason. And
it's
and
for a reason.
I look forward to taking that time, of kind of going through it in a way that makes sense to you.
Well, why don't we'll end here and we'll talk now and plan that. And everybody can look forward to hearing part 2 as a follow up to this one. Patrick, thank you. Thank you for the
Oh,
insight. Thank you for the candor. And just for, again, one of the things that a primary thing that drew me in as I started reading was the stories and just your own heart and compassion and vulnerability with it. So thank you. I am the main beneficiary. I'm so grateful I get to share it with so many folks.
thank you.
And
Thank you.
we'll
Well,
do,
I
we'll
feel
do
the
part 2.
same. I feel the same, and I can't wait. Thank you so much, Kevin, for everything. You bet.
Thanks for joining me on this drive. Again, that is Dr. Patrick Kilcarr, Kilcarr. And the book that was my muse, Leading an Emotionally Intelligent Life, Expanding Your Emotional Intelligence to Make Courageous Decisions and Transform Your Life. Dr. Kilcarr, again, has a private practice in Washington, D.C. You can find everything about him at the EI, Emotional Intelligence, theeilife.com. Got a question, comment for myself or for Patrick? Go to kevinmiller.co and let me know. I hope this episode helps you drive further, and most of all, enjoy the ride.
Yeah.